Allan, est-ce que tu peux venir sur scène? Et faites-lui un maximum de bruit, s'il vous plaît.
Hello. I will try and talk slowly, but I'm sure your English is much better than my French. So, hi. Oh, good. Next slide. Hi, I'm Allan. I'm CTO at Webflow, which means I get to run all the technology teams and everything that we build at Webflow. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how we build what we build at Webflow, a little bit about tomorrow, and then open it up for questions. So some of you might have some questions about what we're building and how we build it, and I'm happy to answer those any way I can. So that's why we're here. Hopefully you all know a little bit about Webflow, but if you don't, the basic idea is build amazing websites, super cool and super fast. Okay, let's just go with that. A little bit about me. Just to give you a little bit of background on who I am and why I'm here. I live in San Francisco, but I actually spend quite a bit of time here in Paris and in France. I do love Paris and I do love everything French. So I'm here and I spend a lot of time here. I love scaling high-tech companies. That's what I do. I basically have helped and been involved in lots of tech companies, scaling them from companies literally this size to much bigger. I joined Cisco Systems, for example, the networking company, when it was about 35 people, and left when it was about 30,000. So that was quite a change. I joined a company called Zynga, which you might know from the gaming world, things like Mafia World and Farmville and things like that. Took that company from an engineering team of about 100 up to, we took it public and IPO'd and all that good stuff. I was VP of engineering and ran all of engineering at Slack, which some of you may know or might be using right now, and was helping scale that company again before we were public and through the public IPO, and then got bought by Salesforce, you might know. I joined a company called ServiceNow. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but it's an enterprise software company. Again, the engineering team was about 35 or 40 when I joined. We took it public, and the company was like 10,000, and the engineering team was like 3,000 when I left. And the job before Webflow, I was Chief Technology Officer at Shopify, which is a large e-commerce company you might have heard of. And that was a little bit of a different turn in my career, that I inherited a team of about 3,500 people. And that was fun to manage that group during the pandemic. I was at Shopify for a couple of years. And now I'm here at Webflow and been here just over a year. So I joined Webflow in March of last year and I just hit my 1-year anniversary. So I know almost as much as you do about Webflow. I've written a few books along the way, and I really love being involved in public companies, and I teach at Berkeley and I do some things with some universities in the United States, but I just really love sort of like sharing technical knowledge and working on technical things and growing companies. Enough about me. So what do I do at Webflow? I run our engineering teams. In case you don't know, Webflow is a company of about 700 people. So of that, about 200 or so run in engineering, and another team is our security team. So I run our engineering teams and our security teams. And that means everything we see in Webflow, whether it's the designer, what we call the designer when you're doing the designs, if you're in editing, which you're actually editing live websites, if you're dealing with publishing, which is actually putting the website up on the internet, doing with products like localization. I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do for AI. You might have heard of this AI thing that's going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing for AI. That's all part of engineering. And then security. So I always say the best thing about a SaaS product is it's available. That's number one, it has to be up and running. The next thing I say is it has to be secure. Because if I put your data up on the internet and then it's insecure or leaks or has a privacy issue or anything like that, that's a bad day. And then the third thing I say is it has to perform well. So that's sort of the way I think about things. So my priorities are generally build amazing products, make sure they're secure, make sure they're up, and then make sure they're performing well. But I run all of that at Webflow. What does that mean in terms of how we actually organize the teams themselves? So when we think about what you all do with Webflow, there's a couple different areas we think about. We think about you want to attract new customers. So we have what we call a growth team or a lifecycle team that sort of helps bring customers into Webflow. Think of that, if you think about anything like the Figma to Webflow plugin. If you think about the things we do when you have that first time you land in Webflow and you ask you those questions and try and land you in the designer a certain way, that's all part of that team. Then we have a team we call design and build. which is probably a lot like how you think about Webflow. It's a design tool that allows you to build websites. So that's everything from the HTML elements that you see in Webflow to the CSS styling to what happens with components and rendering. All of that is part of the design and build team. The next team we have, and the way we think about you all use it, is we have a team called Manage and Optimize. So think of this as localization. Think of this as anything that you use to manage your websites. Think of this as doing things like A/B testing or optimizing your site or integrating with third-party tools. So we have a team that works on that. The next set of functionality we have, if you look up here, if I look at just what's on here in the screen, like localization would be like our Manage and Optimize. Custom properties, which you may have seen we just launched, which is custom CSS. That's part of design and build because you're designing a website in that space. Variables, which we launched at our conference last October, was also part of design and build. Spline integration, which is a 3D modeling tool that's part of our lifecycle and bringing more content into Webflow. APIs are part of a system that we have across all the different teams. And then the other one that we talk a lot about is collaboration. So I don't know how many of you have used any of our collaboration tools. How many have used our collaboration tools? Okay, that was, maybe you couldn't hear me. But think about being able to have multiple people designing at the same time, using branching, having people editing and commenting on the site, having staging sites so you can actually have something staged and have people comment on it before you publish it. All that is our collaboration and scale team. So that's like the product teams that we have. And those product features really, again, the way we think about it is what do you do in the site? You start out growing the site, then you build it, or you grow your customer base, then you build it, then you design and build it, then you manage and optimize it, then you collaborate and scale with it. And then we'll have a couple of other things we're going to talk about here in a second that you also do on the site. So that's how we organize the basic structure of the teams. We also have a whole bunch of infrastructure teams because a lot of this stuff, Webflow is kind of unique. It's unique in the sense that we both help you design and build and optimize and collaborate and scale the sites that you build, but then we actually run it on the internet too, right? So we actually publish it and then run it. And that requires a lot of work with our cloud provider, which is Amazon. So we do use Amazon for our cloud configuration. If anybody wants to talk about availability zones and security groups and all the good stuff on AWS, let me know. But that's sort of the magic that makes when you hit the publish button in Webflow, have it all just sort of show up and become a real website. There's a lot of magic behind the curtain that actually makes all that happen. So we use what's called a CDN, which is a content distribution network, to deploy your content out to 300 different locations, about 125 countries. That all happens in the time that you hit the publish button and it goes dung, 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 and it's live. We've literally taken what we call the canvas in the designer at that point, converted it to HTML and CSS, published it into a system we use called AWS Lambda, and then put it out and deployed it into many, many countries using a content distribution network. So we do that within way faster than it just took me to explain it. And then what happens is then your site is up and live. But that all requires lots of scale, a lot of reliability, a lot of availability, a lot of people behind the scenes thinking about how do we make that really run. Because in an ideal world, you're going to hit publish on your website, and for all we know, 10,000 people hit it 1 second later. So we have to be able to handle that load. Matter of fact, we did have a Taylor Swift website for Brazil on Webflow, and that traffic was literally a straight spike up. Like when they published it, it was pretty crazy. And I've seen that, when you think about people joining Slack, or you think about a new merchant joining Shopify, or you think about what we saw with some of the gaming sites I've done. We had a game at Zynga. This is old, so I don't think this data is too confidential anymore. We launched the game, and it went from 0 users to 70 million users in 5 hours. So think about that, 0 to 70 million. I know it's 1/3 of the United States, roughly, in 5 hours. So that sort of scale you have to be able to think about. That takes a lot of infrastructure magic underneath all that. The other thing that a team that we run in this collection is, and maybe some of you want to talk about this later, is something called developer productivity. So this is how do we make our developers more productive? How do we make the build times be really, really fast? How do we make the deploy times? How do we make the test times work for our developers? And I really think that when you've got a large engineering team, every single time you can make the cycle of those teams more productive, you make the whole thing faster. So we have a team that works on that. And if you ever want to talk to me about how we do builds, which we do, we use something called BuildKite. If you ever want to hear about how we do testing internally, we use called Mocha, we use something called Jest, we use something called Cypress. If you ever want to hear about any of that, we can get into that detail. But maybe the bigger message is we test a lot before we ship. And we don't always catch it all, I will tell you that. We definitely ship bugs, but we also have systems in place to make sure we can fix those bugs very, very quickly. So you might say, well, what are you working on now? What's top of mind for you right now, Allan? So a couple things. Right at the top, AI. I've heard of this AI thing. I think it might be important. And we haven't launched a lot in AI yet, to be fair. We have behind the scenes. You haven't seen it yet, but it's coming, and it's coming soon. And the reason we haven't is a couple different reasons. When we looked at what's in the market today from an AI website generation sort of perspective, we found a lot of the tools are very templated, and they produce the same thing over and over and over again. And that wasn't really compelling to us. We know that the Webflow community, the people that build professional websites for your customers, for your clients, for your companies, you don't want something that looks like 50 other sites out there. You want something that's unique. So we spent a lot of time figuring out how can we build an AI model that will take in your TypeScript, that will take in your spacing, that will take in your typography, your color scheme, your variables. And that way, when you design sections and when you design pages, it looks like something that already you would either design, or it looks like something you can use as a reference site that we can pull in that data and then use. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we use AI to make your creative mark, the way you design websites, more impactful. The other thing we've been thinking a lot about is how do we, I was saying this earlier as we were sort of talking about this, how do you sort of take the drudgery out of building a website? There's a lot of work that is very, how to say it, kind of boring. You have to add SEO tags to everything. You have to have alt text on all images. You want to make sure all of your H2 headers are the same size. You want to make sure the same tint of blue on the third page you added last year is the same as the tint of blue on all other pages. You want to make sure accessibility, your contrast ratios are correct across the entire site. So there's a lot of things we're thinking about that will just help you design more professional websites faster with AI. And we can talk a little bit more AI during the Q&A because I'm sure you have some questions. But that's generically where we're heading. Another thing we're spending a lot of time on is performance. You might all think the websites are fast that you produce with Webflow, and they are. They're very, very fast. I don't know if you noticed, but we increased our Lighthouse scores about 3 months ago. Our default Lighthouse scores honestly weren't great. They were in the 80s, sort of performance-ish. Now they're in the 95s and above by default. So we spent a lot of time behind the scenes reducing the CSS bundles, making sure we did the right jQuery packages, made sure that we deployed the content, that you're putting the images, making sure WebP images are done properly, making sure we reduced image size for mobile. There's just 1,000 little things we did to make performance of your sites, once you've published them, Webflow quite a bit more performant. And you're going to see more of that coming. So to us, that's always like one of the 3 major pillars of website in our product. You want to be able to have a site that's up and running and designing. You want to be able to have a site that's secure, and then you have to have a site that's performant. So we want to make sure we're doing that as well. This little picture over here stands for analytics. One of the things that you're going to see from us fairly soon, I don't know if we've announced this publicly, so maybe I just did. Don't tweet about it. We are definitely thinking about how do we help people with the analytics portion of their site. What pages are the most popular? What sites are the most popular? What browser types are coming? What's happening on the website? Where are you getting the best hit for your website? Where are people going? Which pages are they using, et cetera? So we're spending a lot of time on that. We're spending a lot of time behind the scenes making sure everything's more secure. So that's what the little lock icon there means. Again, we can talk about lots of details. I can really, really bore you on security things for a while if you want, but just know that we run secure tests on the sites every single day. We're always upgrading packages. Whenever there's something like the vulnerability that came out last week with XZ, I don't know if anybody saw that, but there's a public library for open source that came out. We don't use it, don't worry about it. Our Linux images didn't end up using that compression package, so we're good. But there's all sorts of things that we always have to keep up on, and we have to make sure that we're keeping things very, very secure. And the last one over there is more clouds, more CDNs, being able to deploy things in different locations. So if you think about the big things coming from us, I bucket them in AI, performance, more insights into the analytics on your site, making sure things are more secure, and making sure we're deploying them globally for you. The other thing we spend a lot of time on is shipping. I don't know if you know this, but we actually ship about 15 times a day. So on a given day, any given day, 10 or 15 times, we're putting new code out into the site all the time. So it might not seem like that, but we are shipping very, very quickly. You'll see lots of little things that will ship. Some of them you won't even notice. Some of them you will notice that we just did. And the Webflow community is particularly good at finding things that we ship before we announce them. So if you really want to know what's going on Webflow, read the Reddit. Read the subreddit on Webflow, because like people find that stuff instantly. Like, how did they see that? Like, we didn't even announce we were doing that, and like 5 people are like commenting on it within 5 minutes. So I don't know how y'all do that, but it's pretty cool. But we spend a lot of time shipping things and thinking about how do we increase the velocity of what we're shipping, because we know, this is a big market, right? Again, I don't know exactly where this quote comes from, but there's something like 1 million websites a week being produced on the planet. Yeah, you all raised your eyes. I did too. I raised my eyebrows. I was like, what? I mean, they're not all like, it's not like the entire volume of all the websites on the planet is increasing by 1 million a week. But think of like A/B testing, landing pages, events, all sorts of things that are constantly churning. So there's like 1 million new sites of content in some way or another. Again, I don't remember exactly where I learned this number. Maybe it's urban legend or a myth, but it feels like there's a lot of stuff out there. I know Webflow, we're seeing hundreds of new sites every hour being produced on Webflow. Every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we know that there's a very large volume. And we know when you're talking about a market that's big and evolving, you have to keep up the pace. You have to keep the evolution and the innovation going. Otherwise, you end up sort of being a very old, dead product that no one wants to use. So one of the things you might ask is, how have we increased our pace of shipping? I've been fortunate when I joined Webflow. What everyone told me in the community is Webflow isn't shipping fast enough. So if you think about, I don't know if you all gave that input, but before I joined about 1.5 years ago, literally I asked people when I joined, I said, hey, I'm here, I'm new, I'm running parts of this thing. What's going on? And they all said, you're not shipping fast enough. And I said, okay, I can fix that. And now you'll see that we're shipping all the time. So how did I increase the pace of shipping? And I think this is a philosophy, an engineering philosophy, if you will, that I've taken from company to company. And essentially, this is what I tell my teams. There's approximately 25 engineering teams, roughly, inside of Webflow. And I want every single one of them every day waking up and thinking this. Number one, is there any customer issues? We call them P0, P1. Like, is there any like really hot burning customer issues that need to be fixed right now? If the answer is yes, I don't want that team, or I want to make sure that team allocates resources to get that work done right now. The next thing I say is make sure whatever caused number one doesn't happen again. This is a really, really important part of engineering. And these are typically things like, we have this thing we call root cause analysis. We have these things called postmortem incident action items. And think about it this way, like imagine we ship a piece of code and we take the site down. It happens. It happened a couple weeks ago for about 3 minutes. You want to avoid having coffee in the morning, wake up to the site being down. You don't need coffee that morning. You're awake right away, especially when Vlad is like texting me. So that's always fun. So then we went through and we found the issue. We rolled it back. It was back in 3 minutes. But then became the hard part. Like, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? So in this particular case, we had to make sure we had better tests on the code. We had to make sure we had a rollback plan that was valid. We had to make sure that the team understood the corner case that had caused the outage. And then we had some code. We had some code to go right to fix that. And then the thing is if you don't do things in this order, what you'll find that engineering teams generally do is they wake up every morning and they want to build great product. That's what we're all here to do, right? We wake up and think, what can I build? What's cool? And we go build something really fun. But the problem with that is you wake up in the morning, you start to build something really cool and really fun. But if you haven't fixed the customer issue, then a lot of people are going to be like in your ear, what are you doing to fix this issue? And if you haven't made sure that it won't happen again, you're going to find out that while you're off here innovating and working on a cool product, that's going to blow up again. So here's the way things generally work within engineering teams. Engineering teams will wake up and say, what cool stuff can I build? Okay. Then something will go bump or boom in the middle of the night. Something will break. They'll run to fix that. And then they'll completely forget about number 2. Because I got something to ship. I got to get stuff out. I'm working on AI. I got to go work on that. And then meanwhile, you forgot the sort of, we call it pothole. I don't know if that translates well, but sort of the hole in the road, right? The bump in the road. You forgot about that until it happens again. So what I find engineering teams generally do is they do this in the wrong order. They wake up and they work on product. When there's something that goes bad, they'll fix it. They'll go back to working on product. And then this will build up what we call tech debt. This will build up sort of over time. It's like, oh yeah, I got to go fix that database query. Oh yeah, I got to go patch that server. Oh yeah, I should probably figure out how to do that Kafka queue a little bit better because that queue had an issue and it caused an outage. I've got to go figure this stuff out. I'll do that later. I'll worry about that later. And generally what happens then is you'll end up with teams that will do things 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, and then they'll forget about 2. And you'll end up with this huge corpus of tech debt. You all do it on your sites. I guarantee on your Webflow sites, you do this, right? You work on the cool site, you find the bug from the customer, think, oh yeah, I should probably go back and fix that sometime, but I just don't have time. I'm gonna go back and build the new cool thing on the site until eventually the pastor comes in and says, hey, what about my SEO? Hey, what about my keyword search? Hey, what about my landing page optimization? And you gotta go back and do it. So what I end up doing is I end up teaching the teams that the best way to ship and the best way to get better velocity is do things in this order, and this is the most important part. So if a team wakes up, doesn't have a customer issue, great. Doesn't have any incident backlog items or things that will cause a customer issue, great. Go build all day long. But the second you have a problem, and by the way, every team ships a bug. Just no such thing as bug-free software. Every team will have a problem. As long as you remediate the issues and make sure they don't happen again, you're going to end up with much more time to innovate. And if you follow things in this order, at least from an engineering and security perspective, if you do 1 and 2 really fast, like you sort of allocate somebody, find the issue, fix it, take that part off the plate, then you find you spend most of your time in innovation. So we spend a lot of time practicing this. This is something that teams don't generally like to do. You stand in front of an engineering team of a couple hundred and say, you don't get to work on product until you fix your issues and make sure that they don't blow up again. And they look at you like, but I've got a product deadline. And my answer is, nope, push the deadline out, get 1 and 2 done, because once you do, all you're gonna do is work on 3. So we got into that muscle memory, we got into that pattern, we got into how to do that properly at Webflow, and now you're starting to see this happen a lot faster. Some people call this ruthless prioritization, and it's kind of a harsh term, actually. I don't actually prescribe to that term, but the term that I like to use about this, and this is the really important part about leading engineering and security teams, is clear as kind. So I don't know if you know this woman is Brené Brown. If you haven't watched Brené Brown, she's got this amazing talk on how to be a leader. She's like a leadership guru. She's just amazing. And she says clear as kind. And what that means to me is I will go to an engineering team and I will say, hey, you've got an incident backlog of 5 items. You haven't finished it. Well, we got this thing we launched a couple weeks ago and I should really add another feature and so on. Like, No, I told you your priorities. Stop working on that sprint, stop working on that Jira task, stop working on that issue, go back and do your priorities. And I think that the clearer you are when you're leading teams, and the clearer you are in helping people understand their priorities, and the clearer you are in setting up those priorities, it just allows you to execute so much faster. Because otherwise, you're always trying to do more. You're always trying to think about what else can I add. We launch a lot of things at Webflow in what we call minimum lovable product. You might have heard about minimum viable product. We don't think viable is the right way, because viable means like you're barely alive, right? In English, it's sort of like viable is like I'm viable, like I guess I'm breathing and standing, but not really doing a whole lot. So we talk about minimum lovable product. We want to make sure we ship enough that you all will love it, but we also don't spend a lot of time like thinking about every little particular feature we can add, but we do those as fast follows. That's why you're seeing all these things ship all the time. So if you want to hear more about what we're shipping, I'm actually doing a live stream with a woman I think you all know, Emily Linetto, who's our leader of community. She's amazing. She's the one that got me hooked up to show up here. And we actually recorded, I'll let you know a little secret. We actually recorded the live stream last week because I'm here and Emily's in San Francisco right now. And we're actually going to play it on April 24th. Yeah, that's a little QR code I made if you want to register for the live stream. So it will talk about 26 things that we have launched or are launching between now and April 24th. So we're going to go through a big laundry list of things. We call these tiny but mighty in our live stream. So again, since you're all here and I can tell you about this. So we recorded this last week in San Francisco where Emily and I were sitting next to each other. You'll recognize it's in the Webflow studio, sort of the studio you see from the university folks. And then on the 24th, when the live stream actually goes live, I'm going to be in New York and she's going to be in San Francisco, but we're going to handle the live Q&A from 2 separate locations. So it's going to be kind of fun. All right, so now a little bit more about where we're going in the future. I want to do a little bit of predictions on questions you're going to ask. So I did a little future telling on my own. So let me answer these questions, and then we can sort of go from there. Because I came from Shopify, question 2 is like on the perennial list that everyone asks me about is e-commerce. So I'll ask that one. But what is Webflow doing in AI? So as I talked about a little bit earlier, we are definitely spending a lot of time on AI. We are definitely spending a lot of time on giving designers tools to use their design palette, their design aesthetic, their design style, their design systems with Webflow. So look for that to be shipping. You'll start to see the first part of that. You all say knock on wood? Did you all say knock on wood? Is it like a phrase? Okay, it's like you knock on wood. That'll all be shipping hopefully in the next month or so. So you're going to see that's actually into alpha, which means we have a very small set of internal and external people starting to use it this week. So you'll start to see that come out pretty quick. Secondly, what are we doing for e-commerce? Anybody use our e-commerce features? Okay. A little bit. All right. Yeah, they're a little bit good. We actually haven't done a whole lot in e-commerce in the past year or so. This goes back to the clear is kind part. We are not spending much time on e-commerce right now, but what we are spending a lot of time on is increasing our CMS rate limits and our CMS items and our CMS collection lists into things that make e-commerce great in Webflow. When I was at Shopify, just to give you some context, Webflow, as I told you, the company is about 700 people, right? Shopify's team to work on checkout, just the thing on the mobile checkout and the web checkout. Anyone want to guess how big the Shopify checkout team is? It's about 550, yeah. So we're not going to compete with Shopify or Salesforce or Magento on e-commerce features. We're just not. We're just not that company. What we are, though, is we are a great way for people to build headless e-commerce systems and have amazing design systems in front of a back-end e-commerce system. And that's what people sometimes call headless e-commerce. So the idea is the e-commerce system doesn't have a UI in front of it, and then you actually see people doing amazing website designs on the front end in tools other than like Shopify. So at Shopify, we had a couple of very, very large customers. One of them, I know, I'll just say, makes skateboard apparel and has a red logo, and they launch things at Thursday at 10. So I don't know if you know who that is yet, but you can figure that out. Their website front end was in Adobe Experience Manager. They spend a couple $1,000,000 a year building that fancy little slider they have on their front end, and the back end was all Shopify. And it's funny, as I was working on that project at Shopify, I kept thinking, man, this is really expensive to build a website. And they should have a better way to build the front end of this. And I think if you see what's happening in our community, a lot of you are building really amazing e-commerce websites and then tying it into our CMS and then tying it into back-end e-commerce engines. People always ask, why can't you do more in e-commerce? And I think the short answer there is e-commerce is complicated. There's a lot of things when you think about payments in different currencies and returns and bundles and subscriptions and rebates. And the checkout team is, there's a lot to do with checkout. We all use checkout every day when we shop on e-commerce and we see a little shopping cart, but you think about things like, hey, here's another offer for your shopping cart as you're headed in. All that takes a lot of logic. And checking out on mobile is much different than checking out on the web, which is much different than single page checkout. There's just a lot to do with e-commerce. And I think I've somewhat successfully convinced the Webflow team that what we should be working on is sort of the front end of e-commerce shops and letting e-commerce engines sort of do their thing on the back end. That's what's happening in e-commerce. What's the next thing for Webflow apps? I don't know if you know this, but we just, again, I don't know if this is public yet, but I think we just crossed 100 something apps in the App Store. So we just launched the App Store October at WebflowConf, and we now have over 100 apps in the App Store, and they're doing some amazing things. So you're going to see more APIs from us. If you're building an app, you're going to see faster API rate limits. You're going to see more CMS items. You're going to see higher CMS rate limits. You're going to see lots of things to basically scale the platform up on the app side. We just launched a whole new set of APIs, particularly around forms and around CMS that's coming out. Probably the other big thing that we did, and this is maybe a couple levels down that's kind of geeky, but applications refer to things in our CMS by what's called a CMS ID. And what happened is when you would save a backup in Webflow, when we restored that backup because you wanted to come back, we'd create a whole new set of IDs. And that was causing a real problem for people because you'd be referring to things by ID number because you'd queried the CMS, and then customer would go back and you do a backup and everything would break. We just changed all that. That was actually one of those make sure it doesn't happen again sort of things. And it was really a lot of issues that were resolved. It's called stable CMS IDs, and you all don't care. It's a geek issue. It's a geek thing. It takes a long time under the scenes, but it just made the APIs a whole lot better. That's all I had. So I just wanted to open it up and see any questions y'all might have about what we're working on. You're very kind.